HOA Karen called cops as we moved in. She froze when the officer proved we owned it. The moving truck hadn't even stopped when the patrol car screeched up behind it, lights spinning like she'd caught a burglary in progress. I stepped out holding a lamp and a woman in a visor was already pointing at me, screaming at the officer that I didn't belong here. "That's him. That's the trespasser," she shouted, and I just stood there, keys to my own front door still warm in my pocket. The officer looked at her, looked at me and asked the one question that would end her little show before it began. "Sir, is this your property?" I smiled, pulled out the closing documents from my back pocket and said, "As of yesterday, yes." Her face didn't just fall. It collapsed, like a woman watching her whole kingdom crumble in real time on a quiet cul-de-sac. "My name is Everly Grant, and 3 weeks earlier, I had no idea Diane Wexler even existed. I just closed on a modest 3-bedroom in Willow Creek Estates, a subdivision that looked friendly enough on the flyer. Willow Creek had manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and a homeowners association that promised to protect property values for everyone. What the flyer didn't mention was that the HOA president had appointed herself queen of the entire street. Diane Wexler had lived in Willow Creek for 11 years and had chaired the board for 9 of them, unopposed. Neighbors later told me elections kept getting postponed due to low turnout, which was Diane's polite way of saying rigged. I moved in as a single dad with my 12-year-old daughter, Maya, excited for a fresh start after a rough divorce. We'd saved for 2 years for that down payment, and I remember crying a little when the seller handed me the keys. That first morning, before the truck even arrived, Diane was already on my porch measuring my mailbox with an actual tape measure. "Regulation says 18 inches from the curb," she informed me before I'd said a single word of hello. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She was not joking. Diane Wexler did not make jokes about property regulations. By noon, she'd called the police claiming an unauthorized person was moving belongings into a house that wasn't mine. Except it was mine, closed and recorded, title clean, deed filed with the county 3 days prior. The officer, a patient man named Deputy Ruiz, checked my paperwork, then checked Diane's face and sighed the sigh of a man who'd been here before. "Ma'am, this is his house. You can't call us every time someone new moves onto the street." Diane straightened her visor, muttered something about keeping the neighborhood safe, and marched back to her identical beige house. Deputy Ruiz apologized on her behalf, told me quietly, "She does this every new family. Every single time." I didn't know it yet, but that sentence, "every single time," was the first thread of a much bigger fabric. Maya, watching from the truck, whispered, "Dad, is that lady going to be a problem?" I told her no. I was wrong. Within a week, our welcome mat had a citation stapled to it for being non-compliant beige, not approved taupe. I genuinely thought the letter was a prank until I read the HOA logo embossed at the top in gold foil. The fine was $15, which felt absurd until I learned fines compounded weekly if left unresolved. I paid it just to avoid drama, thinking a small concession now would buy me peace with my new neighbor. Peace was not for sale. Not with Diane. I would learn that the hard way, paragraph by painful paragraph. The next citation came for a garden gnome Maya had placed by the porch steps, a gift from her grandmother. "Statuary requires board pre-approval," the letter read, as if a 6-inch ceramic gnome threatened the town's entire aesthetic. I called the HOA office. A tired woman named Pam answered and said, "Yeah, that's Diane's rule. She wrote it herself." Pam sounded exhausted, like someone who'd spent years fielding complaints about a woman she couldn't stop. I started noticing patterns. Every new family on the street got hit within their first month, always for something petty. The Fernandez family got cited for a swing set visible from the street. Their kids were 6 and 4. The Okafor couple got fined for parking a work van overnight, even though half the street did the same thing. Nobody fought back. Everyone just paid, grumbled, and hoped Diane would move her attention elsewhere eventually. She never did. Diane thrived on it, like a plant that photosynthesized other people's frustration into pure control. I decided, quietly, that I wasn't going to be someone who just paid and hoped. I started keeping a folder. Every citation, every email, every date and time, I scanned it all into a folder labeled simply Diane. My sister, a paralegal, told me over the phone, document everything. HOAs love bullying people who don't keep records. So I kept records. Photos of my lawn before and after violations. Time-stamped emails. Screenshots of contradictory rules. 3 weeks in, Diane sent a notice claiming my grass was unmowed and hazardous, dated the day after I'd mowed it. I had a photo from that morning, time-stamped, showing freshly cut grass in neat, even rows across my yard. I replied to the citation with the photo attached and a polite, one-line response, "Please see attached evidence." She didn't respond. She simply issued a new citation 2 days later for something else entirely, my trash cans. Bins must be stored out of street view except on collection day, the notice read, as if I'd committed a felony. My bins were behind my fence, invisible from the street, which I proved with, you guessed it, another photo. That's when I noticed something strange. Her citations always arrived exactly 48 hours before I could formally appeal. The appeal window, conveniently, closed the same afternoon the board reviewed cases, always with Diane casting the deciding vote. I started attending the monthly HOA meetings, sitting quietly in the back, taking notes on a legal pad. The first meeting I attended, Diane spent 20 minutes railing against certain new residents who don't respect our community standards. She never said my name. She didn't have to. Every head in the room turned slightly in my direction. A man named Walter, who'd lived there since the neighborhood was built, caught my eye and gave a small, knowing nod. After the meeting, Walter approached me in the parking lot and said quietly, "You're the new guy on Maple Court, right?" I nodded. He glanced around before speaking again, like Diane might be hiding behind a bush somewhere listening. She did this to the Hendersons 2 years ago. Fined them into foreclosure, practically. They just left. That word, foreclosure, landed heavy in my chest. This wasn't pettiness. This was a pattern with real casualties. Walter told me one more thing before driving off, check the HOA bylaws. Really check them. She's not following her own rules. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a laptop, a cold coffee and the HOA's 40-page governing document. I read every clause twice, cross-referencing Diane's citations against the actual bylaws she claimed to be enforcing. The garden gnome citation. The bylaws only restricted statuary over 3 feet tall. Maya's gnome was 6 inches. The trash bin citation. The bylaws explicitly allowed bins visible from the street if screened by a fence, which mine was. Citation after citation, I found the same thing, Diane wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them as she went. I started a second folder, bylaw violations, Diane's, not mine. It grew faster than I expected. Maya asked why I was staying up so late with paperwork. I told her, sometimes the person making the rules breaks them first. She thought about that for a second and said, "So we're gonna catch her?" I smiled. "Something like that, baby." The next morning, a new letter arrived, thicker than the others, threatening a lien against my property for unpaid fines. I hadn't unpaid anything. I'd paid every fine except the 2 I'd formally disputed with photographic evidence attached. That's when I realized the fight wasn't going to stay small. Diane was escalating towards something that could actually hurt me. A lien meant a cloud on my title. It could tank my credit, block a refinance, even threaten the house itself. I called my sister again, this time not for advice but to ask for the name of a real estate attorney. She gave me a name, Priya Shah, a lawyer who apparently ate HOA boards for breakfast, her words exactly. I emailed Priya that same night with my 2 folders attached, subject line, "Need help. HOA is out of control." She responded within an hour, which should have told me immediately how common this exact situation actually was. "This is textbook HOA overreach," she wrote. "Send me everything. Do not pay another cent until we talk." We spoke the next day. Priya asked one question that changed everything. Has she ever been sued by a resident before? I didn't know. So I did what any curious, slightly obsessive new homeowner would do. I went digging at the courthouse. County records were public. I requested case files under Willow Creek Estates HOA and Diane Wexler's name specifically. What I found stopped me cold, sitting on a hard courthouse bench with a manila folder trembling slightly in my hands. 3 prior lawsuits. 3 separate families. 2 settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. 1 dropped after the family simply moved away. The pattern was undeniable now. This wasn't a difficult neighbor. This was a small-scale predator wearing a homeowners association badge. I photographed every page, careful not to remove originals, and drove straight to Priya's office instead of going home. She flipped through the pages, her eyebrows rising higher with every settlement date she read aloud. Everly, she said, this woman has a system. And systems have weaknesses. We just need to find hers. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with Maya's stuffed rabbit on the couch, replaying every citation like puzzle pieces. I noticed something small but strange. Every fine Diane issued routed payment through a separate account, not the HOA's main one. The HOA's main account was public record, filed annually with the state. This second account appeared nowhere official. I mentioned it to Priya the next morning. She went quiet for a long moment before saying, "That's not normal. That's not legal. HOA fine money has to go into the association's operating account," she explained. A separate account raises real questions. Questions like, where was the fine money actually going? And who, exactly, controlled that account besides Diane? I requested financial disclosure records as a homeowner, a right guaranteed under state HOA transparency law, which few residents knew existed. Diane denied the request in writing, citing board discretion, a phrase that appeared nowhere in the actual bylaws. Priya smiled when she read the denial. She just made a mistake on paper. In writing. With her signature. We filed a formal complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Office, attaching the denial as evidence of stonewalling. Meanwhile, the citations against me kept coming, almost gleefully now, as if Diane sensed I was starting to push back. A new one arrived accusing me of unauthorized landscaping for a small vegetable garden Maya and I had planted together. Tomatoes, basil, a few peppers, nothing scandalous, tucked neatly in a raised bed along the side fence. The fine this time was $200, with a threat of daily accrual if not remediated within 72 hours. I didn't pay it. I photographed it, dated it, and added it to a folder that now had its own tab in a binder. Maya started calling the binder the Diane file, said with the flat seriousness only a 12-year-old can manage. At the next HOA meeting, I raised my hand during public comment for the first time since moving in. Diane's smile flickered, just for a second, before she called on me with practiced, saccharine politeness. "I'd like to formally request the association's financial records," I said, "as is my right under state law." The room went quiet. A few neighbors shifted in their seats, exchanging glances like something had finally started. Diane said the records were being audited and would be available soon, a word she'd apparently used for years. After the meeting, an older woman named Ruth approached me in the hallway, glancing over her shoulder nervously. "I've wanted to ask for years," she whispered, "but she blackballed the last person who tried." "Be careful." I asked what blackballed meant exactly. Ruth said, "Suddenly your dog's a violation. Suddenly your car's a violation. Everything." I thanked her and she disappeared quickly, clearly not wanting to be seen talking to me for too long. That night, I told Priya about Ruth's warning. She nodded grimly. "That's retaliation. That's also illegal and provable." We started building something bigger than a single dispute, a pattern of abuse case, with me as the anchor plaintiff. Priya reached out quietly to the Fernandez and Okafor families, the ones fined for the swing set and the van. Both families, cautious at first, agreed to share their old citation records once Priya explained what we were building. Then something unexpected happened. The Hendersons, the family who'd left 2 years earlier, resurfaced and reached out to me. Diane's harassment had gotten so bad they'd sold at a loss just to escape her, moving 3 states away. They still had every email, every citation, every threatening voicemail Diane had left on their answering machine at midnight. Suddenly, my small dispute over a garden gnome had become the thread pulling apart years of documented, coordinated abuse. I sat in my kitchen that night, staring at the growing case file and whispered to no one, "She has no idea." The next morning, I got an email that made my stomach drop before I'd even finished reading the subject line. Notice of intent to foreclose, Willow Creek Estates HOA, it read, my name spelled slightly wrong at the top. Diane had filed a lien claiming I owed over $800 in accumulated fines and legal processing fees. I called Priya immediately, hands shaking slightly as I read the letter aloud over speakerphone. "This is what she does," Priya said calmly. "She escalates fast, hoping people panic and pay before checking anything. But she picked the wrong homeowner this time," she added, "because you actually have a paper trail proving otherwise." Priya filed an emergency response contesting the lien, attaching my documented, timestamped disputes for every single fine listed. The state HOA Oversight Office, already reviewing our earlier complaint, flagged the lien filing as a potential retaliation violation. 2 weeks passed in tense quiet. Diane still waved stiffly when she passed my house, pretending nothing was wrong. Maya asked if we were going to lose the house. I told her the truth, no. Because we did our homework. Then came the twist none of us saw coming, delivered quietly through an email from the Hendersons' old attorney. Diane hadn't just been fining people. She'd been pocketing a portion of every fine through that separate, undisclosed account. Bank records subpoenaed in the Hendersons' earlier settlement, records Diane thought were sealed forever, showed years of transfers. Small amounts, 20 here, 50 there, routed into an account under a name we didn't recognize at first, D. Wexler Consulting. Consulting for what? I asked Priya. She smiled the smile of a lawyer who already knew the answer. Consulting for nothing, she said. It's a shell. She's been skimming HOA fine money for years through a fake business. This changed everything. This wasn't just an overzealous board president anymore. This was embezzlement, plain and documented. Priya immediately amended our complaint to include financial misconduct, forwarding the bank records to the State Oversight Office. Within days, the Oversight Office opened a formal investigation and, critically, froze the HOA's operating accounts pending review. Diane, for the first time since I'd known her, missed a scheduled board meeting entirely, sending no explanation. Rumors spread fast on the neighborhood group chat, which I'd been quietly added to by the Fernandez family. "Anyone know why Diane wasn't at the meeting?" someone posted. Another neighbor replied, "Heard something about an audit." I said nothing in the chat. Priya had warned me to let the process play out quietly, without tipping our hand. But behind the scenes, we were far from quiet. 3 more families had come forward once word started spreading. Each had a story eerily similar to mine, a petty citation, escalating fines and eventually a threatened lien or foreclosure notice. Priya built a class-style complaint, 7 households strong, all pointing toward the same woman, the same fake account, the same pattern. Then Diane made her first real mistake. She panicked, and panic makes people sloppy, even control freaks like her. She sent a mass email to the entire neighborhood claiming the recent rumors were malicious lies from disgruntled residents. She specifically named me, calling me a hostile newcomer attempting to destabilize our community for personal gain. That email, sent from the official HOA account, became evidence too, defamation, Priya said, layered right on top of everything else. "She just handed us a gift," Priya said, laughing for the first time since we'd started working together. I forwarded the email to the oversight investigator within the hour, along with a timestamp and full header trace. 2 days later, an investigator named Mr. Alvarez requested a formal in-person meeting with the entire board. Diane tried to reschedule twice. The investigator, unmoved, set a final date and copied the entire board on the email. Word finally reached the whole neighborhood through official channels, no longer just group chat rumors and hallway whispers. Neighbors who'd quietly paid unfair fines for years started reaching out to me directly, almost apologetic for staying silent. Ruth, the woman from the hallway, texted me, "I should have said more before. I have old records too. Want them?" I said yes. Her records dated back 6 years, showing a fine pattern that started almost the moment Diane took power. The picture forming was staggering. Not one bad year. Not one difficult season. Nearly a decade of calculated, quiet extraction. The night before the investigators' meeting, I couldn't sleep, so I sat outside and looked at Diane's dark, silent house. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, imagining her alone in there, watching everything she'd built collapse. Then I remembered the Hendersons, forced out of their home. I remembered Ruth's fear. I remembered Maya asking if we'd lose the house. The sympathy passed quickly, replaced by something steadier, the quiet resolve of someone who knew he was finally right. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a room I'd only seen decorated for the holiday potluck before. Every board member sat stiffly at a long table. Diane sat at the center, back straight, visor absent for once. Mr. Alvarez opened with a simple statement: "This is a formal financial and conduct review, recorded for state records." He laid out the bank statements first, slowly, letting each transfer date sit heavy in the silent room. Diane's face didn't change at first. She'd clearly rehearsed a version of composure meant to survive exactly this. Then he mentioned D. Wexler Consulting, and asked her directly what services that entity had provided the association. "Landscaping oversight," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Consulting on beautification standards for the neighborhood." Mr. Alvarez asked for any contract, any invoice, any board approval authorizing payment to that entity. There was none. "There doesn't need to be paperwork for every small arrangement," Diane said, her voice climbing half an octave. "Ma'am," Mr. Alvarez replied evenly, "state law requires board approval and documentation for any association expenditure over $50. The room stayed dead silent. One board member, a quiet man named Frank, actually put his head in his hands. Then came the second twist, one even I hadn't fully expected until Priya slid a folder across the table. The beautification consulting fees had started the exact same month Diane's own daughter's college tuition bill came due. The timing wasn't proof of theft on its own, Priya said carefully, but it was a pattern investigators couldn't ignore. Diane's composure finally cracked. "You have no right to dig into my family's finances," she snapped at the room. "We're not," Mr. Alvarez said calmly. "We're reviewing association funds. The timing is simply part of the record." Diane looked around the table for support and found none. Frank wouldn't meet her eyes. 2 others stared at the wall. Then I spoke, for the first time in the meeting, requesting to submit my own documentation into the official record. I handed over the binder, every citation, every photo, every contradiction between her fines and the actual bylaws. Mr. Alvarez flipped through it methodically, occasionally pausing to compare dates against the financial records already on the table. "This citation," he said, holding up the garden gnome fine, "cites a rule limiting statuary over 3 feet. The item photographed here is approximately 6 inches tall," he continued. "This fine appears to have no legal basis." Diane opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, visibly realizing there was no rehearsed answer for this one. One by one, Mr. Alvarez read through my folder, the trash bins, the lawn, the vegetable garden, each fine collapsing under scrutiny. "These aren't enforcement actions," he finally said. "These are fabricated violations issued to a specific resident." That resident, everyone in the room now understood clearly, was me. And I hadn't even brought up the other 6 families yet. Priya stood and calmly introduced the additional complainants, the Fernandezes, the Okafors, Ruth and the Hendersons' sworn statement. Diane's face went pale, then a strange, blotchy red, the color of someone realizing the walls had actually closed in. "This is a coordinated attack," she said, voice cracking. "These people are jealous of what I've built here. What you've built, Mr. Alvarez said quietly, appears to be a decade-long pattern of financial and administrative misconduct. He informed the board that the state would be recommending immediate suspension of Diane's authority pending full investigation. Frank, visibly relieved, moved to second the motion before Mr. Alvarez had even finished his sentence. The vote was unanimous, 5-0, Diane included, since she was legally barred from voting on her own suspension. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound echoing through the silent clubhouse. "You'll all regret this," she said, looking around the table, though nobody looked particularly afraid of that anymore. She turned to me last, jabbing a finger toward my chest. "This is your fault. You did this to me." I said only one thing back, calm and steady, "No, Diane. You did this. I just kept the receipts." She stormed out and the clubhouse door slammed hard enough to rattle the little community bulletin board by the entrance. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Ruth started clapping, slowly at first and others followed, almost disbelieving it was over. It wasn't quite over, not yet, but that room understood something had permanently, irreversibly shifted that night. Mr. Alvarez stayed another hour, taking additional statements, collecting copies of every document we'd brought into the room. Priya squeezed my shoulder on the way out and said, "You did the hard part. Now we let the process work." I drove home in silence, replaying the look on Diane's face, the exact moment her control finally slipped away. Maya was waiting up, wrapped in a blanket on the couch and asked immediately, "Did we win?" I smiled. "We're winning." Over the following weeks, the state investigation expanded, pulling 3 more years of financial records from the frozen accounts. The final total, once fully audited, showed over $40,000 diverted through the fake consulting entity over 8 years. Diane was formally removed from the board, barred from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years. The lien against my house was voided entirely, along with every fraudulent fine ever issued to any resident on record. The association, under new interim leadership, refunded every improperly collected fine, including years of Ruth's quiet, uncomplained-about payments. Diane faced a separate criminal referral for embezzlement, the case moving from HOA paperwork into an actual courtroom. I wasn't required to testify further, but I chose to submit a written statement anyway, for the families who'd left before me. For the Hendersons. For anyone who'd paid a fine on a gnome, a swing set, a van and simply stayed quiet. The neighborhood held new board elections 3 months later, actual contested elections, for the first time in nearly a decade. Ruth ran for a seat and won, promising transparency above all else, a phrase that finally meant something on that street. I didn't run. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last several lifetimes and honestly, I just wanted to mow my lawn in peace. Maya's garden gnome still sits by the porch steps, 6 inches tall, defiantly unbothered by anyone's regulations now. Our vegetable garden grew that summer, tomatoes ripening red along the fence line, no citation ever threatening them again. Sometimes I still see Diane's old house, sold now, a moving truck out front for a family I don't yet know. I make a point of walking over first, before anyone else can, just to say a genuine, uncomplicated welcome. No hidden fees here, I tell them, only half joking. Just a friendly neighborhood, finally, actually friendly. The criminal case against Diane concluded 18 months after that clubhouse meeting, ending in a guilty plea to embezzlement. She avoided prison but was ordered to pay full restitution, a number that, with interest, exceeded $50,000. I heard she moved out of state entirely, somewhere without an HOA at all, which struck me as fittingly ironic. Walter, the man who first warned me in the parking lot, still waves from his porch every single morning now. Couldn't have done it without that folder of yours, he told me once. Some of us just needed someone brave enough to start one. I don't think of myself as particularly brave. I think of myself as someone who simply refused to stop asking questions. Priya still checks in occasionally, sending articles about HOA reform bills, some of which cite our case as an example. Our fight, it turns out, helped push a small piece of state legislation requiring annual independent HOA financial audits. Small comfort, maybe, against everything Diane had cost so many families, but comfort nonetheless and permanent, written into law. Maya, now 13, still calls the old binder the Diane file, though it's retired now, tucked in a closet somewhere. "You should write a book," she told me recently. I laughed and said maybe someday, when the details stop feeling so raw. The truth is, most of it still feels close enough that I check our mailbox height out of habit sometimes. 18 inches from the curb, exactly regulation, though nobody's measuring anymore and honestly, nobody ever really needed to. What I learned, in the end, wasn't really about HOAs or fines or even about Diane Wexler specifically at all. It was that quiet, careful documentation can outlast the loudest bully in any room, given enough patience and enough time. Every citation she mailed me, meant to intimidate, became instead a brick in the case that finally brought her down. And every morning now, I walk past that gnome on the porch and I smile, because we own this house, free and clear.